Chapter 142 Attack to Kill. Han Li was completely ignorant of the Qin clan's situation. However, this did not obstruct his ecstatic mood. While he excitedly walked around the room, he incessantly fiddled with writ of Immortal Ascension in his hand. In addition, the more he looked at this command medallion, the more pleasing to the eye it became. After the time it took to burn a stick of incense, Han Li calmed down the excitement in his heart. He began to think of his plans for the future and the feasibility of traveling to Yellow Maple Valley to formally become an apprentice to a master. After a night of restless, difficult sleep for Han Li, the Great South small meeting had at last come to an end. From the beginning of the morning of the second day, many cultivators had already begun to leave the valley. The people inside the valley had already been reduced to less than half. During the afternoon, there were several slightly older senior experts who appeared in the plaza. After they said a few encouraging words of praise, they declared the formal termination of the Great South meeting. That Taoist master Kuai-Mian was also one of those experts. Suddenly, in groups of 3 or 4 or perhaps like wild geese, the remaining cultivators flew into the sky and floated there. At this moment, Taoist priest Qing Wen and the other went to find Han Li, inviting him to journey with them once more. After a moment of silence, Han Li declined their invitation, greatly angering Wu Jiuzi and the Mo brothers. Even Taoist priest Qing Wen's complexion was somewhat unsightly. Since brother Han is unwilling to travel with us, Qing Wen will not force you. Take care of yourself on your journey, brother. After a sigh from Qing Wen, he said this with a regretful tone. He then patted Han Li's shoulders and departed the valley with the others. Han Li hadn't discovered that during the second that Taoist priest Qing Wen patted Han Li's shoulders, a bit of colorless and formless fine powder left Qing Wen's cuff and scattered on Han Li's clothes. In addition, the area sprinkled with dust was slightly unusual, but nothing could be seen. When Wu Jiuzi and company left the thick fog of the valley, Taoist priest Qing Wen had fallen behind them at an unknown time and took advantage of the thoughtlessness of the several people while exposing a sinister appearance. He suddenly raised his cuff and sent a stream of flame toward the sky. It disappeared into the shrubbery at the side. His face then resumed his normal rightful and strict appearance, as if the actions from a moment ago had not occurred. Han Li did not completely understand what Taoist priest Qing Wen just did, but due to his continuous habit of being cautious, he didn't immediately set off from the Great South Valley but rather waited the night inside the valley. When it was early morning with the dew shining brightly, he stealthily slipped away from the valley in a manner that even gods and ghosts could not see. After he left the Great South Valley, Han Li identified the direction. He used the Imperial Flight technique and lightly tapped his foot against the ground, propelling him about 10 meters away. Like that, his clothes fluttered into the distance. Not long after he departed the valley, 2 people hurriedly rushed over. In front of them was a green ball of light the size of a thumb guiding their way. After they turned to where Han Li was just a moment ago, they followed in the direction that Han Li flew off to. Those 2 people precisely followed the green light's directions. Han Li did not yet stop on the journey, not even resting after having traveled over 100 li. When he arrived at a small hill, he stopped to sit down and eat a few things, recovering his exhausted body and magic power as well. Han Li did not know that his actions, having not followed common conventions, caused the 2 pursuing behind him to curse endlessly. This was not surprising. They had set out on their pursuit before the light of day. Had they not marked Han Li's body, they would have probably lost him. However, their original plan to set a trap ahead of him and ambush him had fallen through. What made the 2 even more incomparably angry was that Han Li's leaps and steps and traversed more than 100 li, causing the 2 to eat a bellyful of dust. They were so tired they could drop. After all, these 2 had been cultivators for a long time and were accustomed to living like princes. Having to bitterly rely on their legs to travel a long distance, these 2 had not experienced this in quite a long time. It was not known how much time had passed since Han Li had sat down cross-legged inside a depression of the hill and shut his eyes, motionless. It appeared he entered a state of selflessness. Apart from the sounds of the hill's wildlife around him, he heard no other noise. It was at this time that somewhere from the nearby earth, the ground broke and emitted several tens of streams of white light directly toward Han Li. The originally motionless Han Li suddenly opened his eyes and saw the cold light. His body suddenly soared into the air without reason, and he lightly landed with both feet on an open space to the side. Poo-poo. Those white lights naturally missed their target. The true identity of the sparkling and half-transparent white lights that had attempted to strike Han Li during meditation was more than 10 incomparably sharp ice alls. When Han Li saw this, his expression became gloomy. He stretched out his right hand and extended his 5 fingers, Zilala. After a burst of explosive sounds, 5 small fireballs appeared at his fingertips. These fireballs, compared to the fireballs of the common fireball technique, were smaller by more than half. Your esteemed self should taste this person's fireballs. Han Li shouted awe-inspiringly while gazing at the place where the ice alls flew from. Then he slightly bent his fingers and suddenly shot them. The 5 fireballs flew out in a line. As soon as the fireballs were about to touch the floor, the image of yellow-clothed man suddenly appeared. Then the man flashed, and his image appeared elsewhere. He happened to avoid the fireball attack. Bang! The small area where Han Li's fireballs exploded left a few large holes that released a blistering hot air. A few of the places exposed signs of melting from high temperature, causing the man who had dangerously escaped death to break out a cold sweat. At this time, Han Li did not pay attention to the holes but rather firmly stared at the yellow-clothed man who jumped out. He was a slender, 30-year-old man with a cunning face. "Why did you ambush me?" Han Li coldly asked. When the yellow-clothed man heard this, he rolled his eyes. He sinisterly laughed several times and said, "You will know in your next life." Soon after, he suddenly yelled with a cold voice, "Go!" Han Li was shocked. Just as he was about to move, he heard 2 slight sounds of ground breaking beneath him. Then, 2 large hands twinkling with a yellow radiance emerged from the ground like lightning and firmly grabbed Han Li's legs. It was as if he were immediately bound with steel chains, causing Han Li to be unable to move a single step. "Brat, your death is certain. Your legs can't move. Let's see how you will dodge my icicle technique," the yellow-clothed man proudly said with an evil smile. He raised his 2 hands toward Han Li and began to mutter to himself. As a result, the threatening cold air in front of his hands gradually condensed into white crystals, eventually taking the form of sharp ice alls. Han Li's complexion greatly changed. His hand pressed against his waist. The tinkling of small bells rang and a cold light flashed. He took out a shining long sword, and without hesitation, he chopped down. Clang! It was as if the sword had struck rock and emitted sparks. In addition, those yellow large hands were unscathed. Han Li was alarmed and angry. When he thought to make another attempt, the yellow-clothed man across from him wildly laughed. "Ha ha! Die, brat!" Han Li's heart sunk, and he immediately raised his head. He saw 20 sharp ice alls fiercely shooting toward his entire body, without giving him a method to dodge. When Han Li saw this, his expression became incomparably grave. He took a deep breath and bit down on his teeth. Without moving, his body strangely twisted left and right. Most of the ice alls were unexpectedly dodged by his movements. Only his right shoulder and left leg were incapable of evading and were pierced through with the ice alls. In an instant, blood flowed from the wounds and leaked through his clothes. "Pa!" Han Li threw away the long sword in his hand. With his 10 fingers, he sealed the blood vessels near his wounds at a lightning-fast speed, causing the bleeding to suddenly stop. Then the originally complacent yellow-clothed man widely opened his eyes, not believing what he had just seen. Han Li's expression grew dark. He used the strength in his 2 calves and unexpectedly twisted them as if they had no bone. After a burst of popping sounds from the legs, he suddenly shrank his body into a ball while he was still alive, and his whole body suddenly fled upward. His legs were like a slippery fish, slipping out from the stiff grasp of those two large hands. He then shot into the air and landed more than 30 meters away, coldly staring at the large hands. Impossible. How did his legs slip out from the grasp of my tremendous strength technique? From the earth below the hands spoke a muffled, angry and alarmed voice. Then the two hands stiffly emerged out from the earth, revealing a burly silhouette covered in a bold yellow light.